Today we're diving into a really powerful idea. How do you build a faith that actually works? We're going to look at a teaching from Apostle Joshua Selman that really gets to the bottom of why so many of us feel stuck, even when we're sincere, and what it really means to be fully persuaded.
So let's just start with the question that I'm sure has crossed your mind. You know the feeling, right? You've prayed, you've confessed, you've tried to believe with everything in you, and nothing. It's so frustrating. So what's the deal? What's really going on when our sincere faith just seems to fall completely flat?
Well, according to Apostle Joshua Selman, this isn't just a personal problem. He actually calls it a widespread, gross faith failure. And it's this weird paradox, isn't it? You see people making these passionate, heartfelt confessions of faith, but then you look at their lives and the results just aren't there. That gap, that space between the confession and the reality, that's the core issue we're going to unpack.
Now here's what's interesting. Where do we usually point the finger when things don't work? We point it right back at ourselves. We think, man, maybe I just didn't believe hard enough. Maybe I wasn't sincere enough. But it turns out that's not the real issue at all. The root cause isn't about the intensity of your belief, it's about the foundation of your belief. The problem goes way, way deeper.
Okay, so to find that deep foundation, we've got to do a little detective work and trace things all the way back to the source. You see, the results in our lives, or the lack of results, they aren't random. They are the absolute end product of a kind of spiritual supply chain. So let's follow that chain back to the very beginning.
And here is that chain of influence, laid out nice and clear. It all starts with the preacher. That's the source of the spiritual information. From there, that information is heard by someone. That hearing then leads to believing, where a real conviction starts to form in their heart. And it's that conviction, finally, that produces the result. So you can see it, right? The quality of what you get at the end is completely dependent on the quality of what went in at the start.
So when you follow that chain all the way back, it leads to a pretty startling diagnosis. Where does the ultimate responsibility for this widespread faith failure lie? Well, the conclusion is that it will finally land on the pulpit. At the end of the day, it all comes down to the quality of the spiritual information being taught.
Okay, so if the quality of information is the problem, what kind of information actually builds a faith that works? Well, there's a huge clue in that famous line from Jesus, "Man shall not live by bread alone." Now, he wasn't just talking about sandwiches. This is a powerful metaphor for two completely different ways of living, two different sources we can build our lives on. And here's how that breaks down. On one hand, you've got living by bread alone. This is all our natural stuff, our job, our business, our own hard work. And that's all great, but it has limits, and it's temporary. But then you've got living by the preceding word. This is a supernatural source. Now, this doesn't replace your job, it adds to it. It brings a dimension of excellence and extraordinary quality, and it produces results that actually last.
All right, so this brings us right to the heart of the solution. If the problem is a shaky foundation built on limited information, the only answer is to build a new one. And that new foundation is what we're calling Bible faith. And let me tell you, this is a whole lot more than just wishful thinking or crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
So, what is it exactly? Well, Bible faith is your confidence in two things, in God Himself and in the total integrity of His Word. But here's the absolute key. This isn't some passive mental thing. It's a confidence that is demonstrated by what you do, by your actions of obedience. It's being so persuaded that you have no choice but to act on it.
And this, right here, is probably the most important idea of all. Real, effective faith is not a blind leap in the dark. It's a product. It's the logical result, the natural reaction that happens when accurate spiritual knowledge and understanding, what the teaching calls light, shows up. That light is what builds a conviction that cannot be shaken.
You know, we see a perfect example of this in the Bible with a guy named Stephen. Check this out. His official job was a pretty natural role. He was appointed to serve tables. But the Bible describes him as being full of faith and power. And what was the outcome of that? He was performing great wonders and miracles and spoke with a wisdom that was completely irresistible. His deep understanding produced results that just blew his job description right out of the water.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, it leads to a very clear call to action. It's a call for that light, a call for us to get accurate spiritual understanding. And as you're about to see, the responsibility for getting that light, well, it's a two-way street.
And that two-way street has two very clear lanes. On one side, you've got spiritual leaders. They have a massive responsibility to serve people with accurate spiritual understanding, that light we've been talking about. But, and this is just as important, on the other side, you've got every individual believer.
We each have a personal responsibility to actively go after and build our own understanding.
And really, this final quote ties it all together beautifully. The cure for a weak faith or a failing faith isn't to just try harder. It's not about mustering up more sincerity. The cure, as Apostle Joshua Selman puts it, is light, a restoration of accurate communication of spiritual truth. It's that simple.
So we're going to leave you with this one question to really chew on. Now that you've seen this chain of influence, it's worth taking a second to honestly ask yourself what information, what teaching, what source has actually constructed your conviction. Because whatever the answer is, that is the architecture of the results you are seeing in your life right now.